Good evening, date walkers and night stalkers. It's me, your twisted southern horror queen, coming to you live from a nerve room right here in southeastern Louisiana. I'm not digging the whole time change thing. Quite frankly, it just kind of freaking sucks. Hey, there's my girl Rhonda joining in from Kentucky. Glad to see you. There's Wade Cuevas. Trouble in the house, Cuevas. Glad to see you. There's Freddie. Hey, my boy. And Clint Wallingford. Happy late birthday, my dear. Hope everything is cool. And there's my beautiful friend from from Florida, Susie Jones. Miss you so much, sweetheart. I'm hoping that you guys are going to stay on the road. You know, I told you you were going to win with the truck. I'm thinking you might win with this one too. It's just kind of a gut feeling, not even a psychic or psychotic thing, girl. All right, so before we get rolling tonight, I'm trying to shake that time change thing, still not digging it. The Naked Wands is helping just a little bit, though. It always does. That is freaking yummy. My girl in E-Town, Kentucky, Pauline Potts, hooked me up with a local brew there at the kickoff party. And, man, that was some freaking fantastic wine. I wish I would have got a bottle of that. Kathy says she's not digging the time change either. And there's my boy Gavin. Glad to see you. So, Freddie, Gavin, how are y'all liking the dark? Man, would appreciate some Amazon reviews from you guys. As a matter of fact, any of you guys who have read any of my books in the past 6 years, 7 years, please go on to Amazon. You can go to authorlyngibson.com, click on each individual link there. Please go post me some reviews. When the contract was up with the publisher and I refused to renew in February, I lost all of those prior reviews. So I really, really need some more reviews on those pages. So go back, remember, refresh your memory, maybe reread the books and post me some reviews on everything of mine you read. I desperately need them and would very much appreciate those. Rhonda, that includes you. Go on Amazon, give me some reviews. Susie, I know you can write me some reviews, my girl. And there's my girl, Angela Moore Smith. I think you've read a couple of my books, too. Please go on Amazon. Give me some reviews. I need them. I'm hurting for them. You know, I'm into masochism and stuff like that, but it's the wrong kind of hurt. Freddie says, loving the song on your website. Sung it a lot in college. Yeah, I'm digging it. That's on my playlist. I crank it up when I drive through Independence because they don't hate me enough. Clint said, I think Amy almost done with her book. That's awesome. Amy owes me a review, too. Got to hear a review from Amy on Amazon. Get on that. Okay, so while we're talking about reviews, got to give a big shout out to the folks over at the lineup with the Creepy Crate. Oh, my God, folks, what are y'all waiting for? It's going to be the last Creepy Crate of the year. You got to get subscribed now. You don't want to miss out on it. I remember last December's Creepy Crate was freaking awesome. The box was actually bigger because they had to put so much stuff in it. It was fantastic. And with so many awesome horror movies coming out right now, there ain't no telling what they're going to cram in there. These folks have been out there scrounging around the scourges of the earth, brushing cobwebs from their eyes and God only knows what from their feet because they're out there collecting all these fantastic horror memorabilia and collectibles for us to stick in that next Creepy Crate. Go to authorlyngibson.com in the right-hand corner. Freddie's going to have it up in just a minute. It's kind of a psychic thing. I know he's going to do it. Click on that link. You can look at some of the stuff that was in some of the past crates. You can also look at the unveilings that I've done on live shows and other videos here on Facebook and see the things that I pull out of those boxes. It's just like Christmas every time they roll around. Well, maybe Halloween. John actually sits there with a knife and helps me cut the box open because he's so excited. He knows I'm going to be freaking out when I start pulling all that stuff out of the Creepy Crate. Hey, Leslie, there's my girl. How you doing, sweetheart? See, Freddie's got that lineup Creepy Crate up there. Y'all check that out. And when you go to subscribe, if you use the code TWISTED at checkout, you get $5 off. I kid you not. I showed you guys, these are two of my I can't say two of my favorites. I got a whole lot of favorites, but this one I just actually got autographed from Tony Moran. I'm trying to put that in the light so you can see. You can kind of see there on the side of Michael Myers' head. Tony Moran was the first Michael Myers. We got that autographed in E-Town at Night Risers 2018. And I'm just freaking tickled about that. I'm going to have to get it framed and stick it in the corner. And another one of my favorite Michael Myers memorabilia, that's a flask. It's nowhere near big enough for me, yeah, but it's cute. You know, you can almost kind of stick it somewhere. Back pocket would be awesome. But yeah, that's a Michael Myers flask. How freaking crazy is that? I wish I'd have thought to take that to E-Town with me. But man, there's so much cool stuff in those little boxes, and the price that we pay for them already, even without the twisted discount code, is incredible. I have never ever found a box with a retail value under $65. They're typically way north of that. So you're getting a freaking killer deal as it is. And then you get $5 off if you use that code TWISTED when you subscribe to the Creepy Crate. That gets delivered to your front door every other month. You just can't beat it. There's Damien. He's in the house. I'm waving back at you, my man. And my favoriteest uncle in the whole world, and Aunt Wanda and D.W. Heron, they're chiming in from Pearl River County, Mississippi. There's some crazy, creepy stuff that goes on in that neck of the woods. Trust me, I would know. All right, so I got my shout out for the Creepy Crate out of the way tonight. Also, there will be some new sponsors jumping on board here real soon. I think December 1, we're going to kick off a couple of new sponsors. So be ready for that. December, not just December, but the whole entire year of 2019 is looking crazy already, and we're still in 2018. We've got 3 confirmed dates so far all over the place. Can't remember exactly what the dates are because that's just too far away to commit to memory, but they're written down somewhere. I'll find those when it becomes pertinent. But yeah, we're going to be all over the place. I know Georgia, probably Kentucky, at least once again next year, maybe more than that. And there's another con in northern Louisiana that we will be at, probably another one in mid-Mississippi, Florida. We're going to be all over the place next year. And there is all kinds of crazy stuff brewing that I can't quite announce yet, but the ball is starting to roll on them. There's all kind of exciting announcements that are coming up real soon, but it's about that time. I'm going to stop rambling on all that madness for just a minute, but only for a minute, because it is now time to dim the lights, kick out the kids, and lock the doors, and grab a tasty adult beverage of your very own, because we're getting ready to get our scary on right here on the Twisted Southern Horror Queen Show. Okay, so tonight we are kicking it off in Portland. Yeah, they got crazy stuff going on up there too. Who'd have thought that? So Portland nowadays is pretty much a civilized little area, right? But back in the day, this place was a freaking madhouse, trust me. Kind of like New Orleans in the old days and present times included. But anyway, Portland made most of its money because of the ports right there, right? So these old 2-story docks were pretty much just a known haven to muggers and murderers and Shanghai operators. Now, besides that, part of the population there was like a volatile mix of these ethnic backgrounds. And most of those folks had been bitter enemies for centuries. So you throw in a whole lot of free-flowing booze and you got a pretty good idea of the atmosphere of old Portland. So these folks, they actually kind of pun the phrase party hard, because this little neighborhood right here was known for drinking hard, punching harder, and going to a whole hell of a lot of funerals for folks that ended their lives quite violently. Perfect atmosphere for ghosts to linger in, right? Well, one of those spots in particular was the White Eagle Saloon. It was a little pub on Russell Street, which has been there since 1906. It was originally founded by a pair of Polish immigrants and was known as kind of the unofficial headquarters for the Polish community there. Now, there was so much violence that went down there at the White Eagle that it earned the nickname the Bucket of Blood. See, I'm telling you, sounds like something from New Orleans, right? So there's some pretty crazy rumors about this little joint right here. And a lot of them are spurred from this old coal chute that's downstairs. It looks like a tunnel entrance. But there's another legend about the mysterious disappearance of the pub's muscular Chinese bouncer, too. Folks say that back in the day, Shanghai operators ran an opium den back in the basement, and that they would haul these unconscious victims down there and then take them out to the river through a secret catacomb. Could you imagine waking up from one hell of a drunk and you're on a ship in the middle of freaking nowhere, obviously on the water, and there's some dude standing over you telling you to get up and get to work because you are now property of the captain that runs that ship? Yeah, that's what happened to those poor drunk bastards that got hauled through the corridors there beneath the White Eagle pub. But no old-time pub is complete without a whorehouse, right? So, of course, the White Eagle also had a brothel upstairs. Now, with all this madness going on there, you better bet there's some crazy hauntings that are going on there still today, right? So there's tons of reports through the years about things being mysteriously thrown around and people being touched and toilets flushing on their own. I'm not real sure what it is with this ghostly fascination of flushing toilets. We see that a whole lot on this show, right? Well, of course, also there's the people that go there and they hear and see things as well as feel things. So out of all the ghosts that are still hanging out there, there's 3 that are spotted pretty frequently. Now, one of them, of course, is that massive Chinese bouncer, and he's got a nasty little attitude, too. So if you decide to go to the White Eagle pub and hang out, stay the hell away from the basement stairs, because there's a lot of people that say some unseen force shoved them down the stairs. Now, I'm thinking that he might have been in charge of that whole Shanghai thing that was going on down there. But apparently, he gets a wild hair up his ass to get on the violent side every once in a while. So you may want to watch yourself if you go hang out there. All right. Besides this massive Chinese bouncer, there's this dude there named Sam. He's still hanging out. Now, he's said to be the ghost of a Polish immigrant. And this is supposed to be the spirit that's obsessed with flushing the toilets. So, of course, that brothel upstairs, you know, it's got to have a few little hoe ghosts hanging out there as well. And if you go up there, there's a very good chance that you're going to run into Rose. Now, Rose is the spirit of a rather unhappy hooker that's still hanging out there today. Folks claim that they can go up there and hear her crying, and a lot of folks have actually recorded hearing those sobs, and some of them have seen her materialize in full form in front of their eyes. Now, there's kind of a cool story I want to share with you about Rose. When the new owners of the White Eagle started doing their remodel, they started upstairs and decided to work their way down. Well, one afternoon they're up there working, and they decided it was time to take a lunch break. So they sit down in the upstairs hallway. Now, the second their asses hit the floor, all of the doors up there on that upstairs hallway slam open. So they're freaking the hell out, and lunch break was pretty much over at that time. Well, they went ahead and hired some contractors to finish remodeling the upper level, and then they sealed it all off. But today they still report hearing sounds of crying and footsteps and furniture moving around, but they absolutely refuse to let anybody go up there and check it out. Not just because of their personal experience there, but they're pretty much convinced that those spirits are fairly powerful, and somebody could be hurt if they go up there, because it seems like to them that they just really want to be left alone. They've also reported that there's another spirit that walks around on the main level, and he makes some pretty frequent trips to the basement. And they've named this ghost Barney. Now, Barney will appear in full form, but for the most part, he's pretty peaceful and he's never really hurt anybody. He's just kind of into popping up in front of people and scaring the hell out of them. I guess that's how he gets his jollies these days. I kind of have a feeling that Barney may have been one of these poor drunk bastards that got hauled down to the basement and through the catacombs and stuck on one of these ships. But that's just a gut feeling. Let's see who else is joining in. Michael Martello, local boy from Independence, Louisiana. He says he'll be home soon. Hope to see you when I do. Well, I'm always around. Just look for that red Camaro with the skull on the hood. Hey, Joan, glad to see you, sweetheart. Glad you're joining in. And there's my boy, Glenn Harrison from Hardcore Paranormal. If you guys are into paranormal of any flavor, y'all need to jump on that group. Glenn has some awesome information, cool pictures, and he does a whole lot of audience participation stuff. Very cool site. Check him out. You can definitely find the link on all of my pages, and the show will be shared on the pages. So hop on there and get busy. Claire is joining in from Scotland. Claire, very jealous, my love, because you guys have some serious haunted history over there, and a whole lot of vampire legends too. Yeah, see, you didn't think I knew about all that, but I do. You're like sitting in a mecca right there. That's freaking awesome. Okay, so we are going to move on now from a haunted bar room to the terrifying tales of yet another nut house where freakish goings on back in the day have instigated a ton of ghost stories and investigations. We're going to talk about the Rhode Island School for the Feeble-Minded, or the Lad School, or you may have actually heard it referred to as Exeter, E-X-E-T-E-R, because that's where it's at. Okay, so this little gym was established in 1908. Now, the first superintendent there was Dr. Joseph Ladd, and this dude was kind of thrown the hell off. Most of those folks are, right? So his mission in life was to remove the feeble-minded from society and cleanse the nation's population of all the inferior and defective genes, right? Kind of sounds like a Hitler guy, doesn't he? This dude was a protege of Dr. Walter Fernald, and we have talked about that freak show before here on the Twisted Southern Horror Queen stream. Yeah, he was another throw the hell off character. That was the dude that actually kicked off the entire idea and means to sterilize all the folks that he considered a burden to society. So back to this dude Ladd. Now, while this dude was running the institution, there were a lot of folks put in this place, and for a lot of different reasons. Mostly for petty crimes. As usual, it didn't take it very long to become overcrowded and understaffed and, of course, underfunded, just like all these other typical nut house stories that we talk about that end very badly. So originally, this joint was designed to where it could comfortably house 600 nut jobs. But just a few years after opening, there were well over 1,200 unfortunate souls crammed into this hellish environment. They mixed the criminals in with the mentally or physically handicapped folks, and the insane patients were in there rubbing elbows with other folks that were infected with contagious and deadly diseases. Yeah, that's a toxic cocktail right there, right? So there were also some patients there of another sort. Women who had had premarital sex were frequently thrown into this nut house, and a lot of them were already pregnant when they got there. So I wonder what happened to those babies, right? Ever hear of that book called The Exeter Girls? Yeah, that's exactly where this came from, and it is based, of course, in truth and history. So yeah, these chicks get thrown into this joint and they wound up involuntarily sterilized, but a lot of them actually didn't even make it through the procedures. So yeah, they're still hanging around there, and trust me, brother, they are some kind of pissed, but they're not alone. There's one frequently spotted spirit there of a 9-year-old little boy, and he's got kind of a brutal story behind him. In 1952, this little boy just up and disappears. Well, most of them did, because they did find his head. The little headless boy has a playmate, though, so he's not there alone. There's another little kid there that was a severely disabled child, and he was murdered by a 20-year-old inmate that had been a lifelong ward of the state. This freak of nature strangled the little boy. He was a 5-year-old little boy, crammed him into a laundry sack, and hung him from one of the shower heads. So these two boys, even though they had some pretty brutal endings, they probably got off fairly easy, because it's a very well-known fact that the children there were abused severely. They were beaten daily. There was just all kind of horrific things that these kids that were in this institution had to go through. So while this dude Ladd is running this joint, obviously there were tons of deaths, and most of them were due to neglect, but some of them were from experiments that went way wrong, or some of them were patients that were given the wrong drugs. And there was actually this one former employee that claimed sometimes there were these involuntary and undocumented surgeries that went down there without the benefit of anesthesia. So yeah, there's a few deaths that are revolving around that as well. But besides all these awesome luxuries, there was, of course, the deplorable conditions, and the patients were just stuck there having to deal with it. This place was overrun with vermin and filth. The patients were dressed in rags, and if they were lucky enough to have a cot to sleep on, it was about 9 inches away from the poor bastard that was laying beside them. These folks were pretty much head to toe, stacked cot to cot to cot to cot in these tiny little rooms, and a lot of those rooms that they were locked in overnight or longer didn't even have toilets or sinks. So imagine that. You get better conditions in jail these days, plus you get internet and shit. So Exeter is said to have a ton of paranormal activity, and if you ask me, it's really kind of hard to understand why, because this place was a nightmare shithole, and you think that once somebody died there, they'd want to get the hell out of there, right? Well, we know here on the Twisted Southern Horror Queen show that that's not exactly how it works in the paranormal world. This joint has been investigated more than a few times, and these folks have never ever left empty-handed. Now, a lot of them have recorded the sounds of moaning and phantom footsteps and crying throughout the main building and the other surrounding buildings as well. There's, of course, tons of EVPs and disembodied voices murmuring and whispering and crying out in agony. And some folks have even witnessed doors opening and closing without any explanation. Those same doors seem to lock once they're closed, even though there's no locks on them. Now, there have also been some creepy growling sounds that are captured in some of the old patients' rooms. And, of course, there's nobody in there, and definitely not any animals are present. Besides those noises and the doors, a lot of folks there have claimed that they've been touched or shoved or had things knocked out of their hands by some unseen force. Now, outside of the facility, it's not uncommon to see human-shaped shadows floating across the field and into the woods. Voices have been heard out there as well, and a lot of people have photographed these floating and glowing orbs. Car radios are said to go haywire or stop working altogether, and a few people claim that their car alarms or their car horns have started just going off for no reason. I'm thinking that the reason why you're seeing these orbs out there and all these human forms floating into the woods, there is a unmarked graveyard there somewhere. Nobody knows where it is anymore, but there's said to be about 1,700 people that are buried there on the grounds, and of course unmarked graves, unmarked graveyard. maybe somebody should follow those orbs and take a metal detector, because they might actually find something out there. But anyway, some of those buildings were reconditioned and used for other purposes after they were abandoned. And this one dude that lived there at what they called the Exeter Job Corps, it was one of the former institution buildings that was there. He didn't stay there very long, though. He said he wakes up one morning and he finds he's got bruises around his ankles and he's got scratches all up and down his arms. He looks around his room and there's a pack of cigarettes along with some other stuff that had been sitting on his nightstand, just kind of flying and swirling around the room. So, yeah, if he was paying rent there, that stopped immediately. There's also another little story there about a ghost hunt that went kind of wrong. Of course, you could consider it went kind of right as well. These two investigators go in there, and they somehow managed to get trapped inside the main building for over 6 hours. They were victims of those slamming doors that locked, that had no locks on them. Well, these two dudes couldn't get the hell out of there, so they said they were going to make the best of it and record what they could, document what they could. So during their stay there, they experienced doors slamming open and closed by themselves. There, of course, were drastic fluctuations in the temperature, and they saw all kind of full-bodied manifests materialize all around them. And I would think that those manifestations were probably there sniffing around, just trying to figure out who the hell they were and why they were there and what they were doing. Also wanted to throw in there that there was a 2015 movie thriller called Exeter that was filmed. And, of course, it was based on the suspected horrors that went down at this asylum. Now, I haven't seen this movie yet. So if any of you guys out there have seen it, chime in. Let us know if it's worth our while to watch it. Give us a little review on it. Let us know what's going on with it. Is it scary, or is it like another Blair Witch BS documentary? Hey, Jeremy, glad to see you jumping on board. Susie said, love Scotland, would love to go there. You and me both, girl. Lawrence, hey, hello, glad to see you jumping on board. Claire said she would swap with us. I'd love to see you come down here. I'll take you to New Orleans. Gavin said, I might have heard of that place before. It's just now kind of starting to make its rounds. Ricky Seaver, glad to see you, sweetheart. Jeff Knipper, wow, I haven't seen that name in a long time. That's a homeboy from Pearl River County, Mississippi. Rashid, nice to see you on board tonight. It's been a while. Chuck Bird is in the house. There is another deviant soul from Pearl River County. That's my boy. Martis, glad to see you. He says, I need more cleavage. I can hook you up with a good doctor, Martis. Andrew Armstrong, my love, I am staring straight at those beautiful paintings you made for me. I did find a spot on my wall that I wanted to hang them, but I'm kind of digging them being on my desk because they're right there in my line of sight. So I don't know, I might leave them there. Haven't decided yet. Claire said, yeah, definitely. I definitely need to do that as well. Let's see what else is going on. Dominic, nice to see you. Michael Wright, I need Jesus. I have Jesus. He watches over me, trust me, because the shit that I get into, I wouldn't be sitting in this chair anymore. Ernie, nice to see you. Donna Payton, glad to see you jumping on board as well. Ernie is hollering for Simon. I'm not real sure who Simon is, but maybe he needs Jesus as well, huh? Okay, so I'm going to sample another little taste of my naked wines here. You guys need to jump on board with that. If you are interested in having your wine delivered to your door at a fantastic discounted price, holler at me. I've got some $100 wine vouchers. Your first case ships for free, $100 off your first case. So you're getting a dozen bottles of some top-notch, high-quality wine for pretty much nothing. You might have to throw a few bucks at it, but it's well worth it. I've researched the individual prices of those bottles of wine, and yeah, definitely a deal. Just like Creepy Crate, you're getting one hell of a discount right out of the door. Michael Wright, we are in end times. Absolutely. You should read my book, Wicked Truth. It will curl your hair. learn how to spell Lucifer, Michael, because that's way off. It's not Lucifer. Gavin, I think that I seen that 2015 movie. Think back and if you can remember if it was any good, because I'm maybe wanting to Netflix that. Andrew said, great place to put them. Many thanks. No, many thanks to you, sweetheart. I love them. They're absolutely beautiful. You're a very talented man. Thank you so much. All right, so now we are going to move on to a hospital of a different sort. We're going to talk about the Yorktown Memorial Hospital. It is said to be one of the most haunted places in Texas. I don't see Lori or Ronnie Owens on board right now, but I might have to ask them about that because they know about haunted stuff in Texas because that's their neck of the woods. All right, so you can find this abandoned nightmare about halfway between San Antonio and the Gulf Coast. Now, Yorktown was originally established when a road was built through the area to connect the Texas Gulf Coast along with New Braunfels. They were shipping product back and forth. They had to have a way to get to those ports, right? So back in the day, it was a really peaceful little community that was centered around high school football and church and kind of like Independence. But there is one dark spot in Yorktown that is anything but peaceful. The old abandoned Memorial Hospital, which is said to be overrun with the spirits of thousands of people that died there. Thousands. So this institution was opened in the 1950s as a medical hospital, but it closed in 1986 when this larger facility was built in a nearby town. So at that point, when it closed, this group of nuns moved in there, and they're called the Felician Sisters. They were part of the Roman Catholic Church. And they decided they were going to take over and open a rehab center there for druggies and drunks. So their intentions were pretty noble here. It's just that shit didn't quite work out like they had planned. So the hospital eventually closed again due to the sisters' inability to control their patients. And once again, the structure was abandoned, at least by the living. So folks say that there's still plenty of patients that are hanging out there today, but not the kind that have a pulse. These poor tormented souls are still wandering those corridors, trying to figure out what the hell is going on, why are they there, what happened, right? Apparently they didn't get the memo that they're dead. So among some of those spirits that are still hanging out there is this dude named Dr. Leon Nowierski. Now this doctor practiced well into his 90s. He actually held the oldest medical license in the state of Texas. But he was notorious for making a lot of clumsy and stupid mistakes, including slitting a patient's throat while he was performing a thyroid procedure. Now, Dr. Nowierski is known to roam those halls around the ER and OR and near the doctor's lounge. He's also said to have a habit of flirting and groping women in his office. Then there's this chick named Stacy. Now, she's a little girl around the age of 8 that likes to play in the basement or in the room that she stayed in while she was there on the first floor, and in the library on the second floor. This is kind of cool. The legend has it that if you go down into the basement and you take a ball and you roll that ball around on the floor and call Stacy to come and play with you, that she eventually will. But you have to blackmail her. If you tell her, I'll read you a story, the ball will eventually start moving around on its own. But you damn well better read her a story. So from there, once she decides to abandon playing ball with you, go up to the second floor and into the library and start reading to her. She will physically materialize in full form in front of you. And they say that her favorite book, which apparently is still there, is Pokey Little Puppy. Make a note of that. You may even want to pick one up just in case some asshole is taking it off the grounds with them. Pokey Little Puppy. Read that to Stacy because she apparently digs it. Okay, another ghost that's hanging out there today is named Doug Richards. He was a heavy equipment mechanic who, according to the evidence that was gathered by different sources, He died in 1973, rather freak accident, very bad, very crushed. Yeah, he didn't make it very long after he was brought in there. But a lot of people have claimed to see his ghost there, and apparently his ghost is in still pretty good condition. He's described as a very tall man wearing blue jeans and a white t-shirt, and he has a pretty happy-go-lucky attitude about him once people see him. Then, of course, there are the nuns there. And a lot of people who have visited or investigated there claim to have seen their ghost. Very obvious because they are dressed like nuns. Yes, they just can't get out of that habit. Had to do that. Anyway, the most common spots to see them are up in the nuns' quarters and in the balcony of the chapel. Now, besides popping up into plain sight, they seem to have issues with folks that have tattoos, mostly females. A lot of females, and of course a few men, have reported being choked or scratched by unseen hands in the very same spots that these nuns are known to hang out most often. There's also a dude there that's named TJ. This dude died of a heroin overdose on the back steps of the hospital. According to the story, there was a bell back there near the back steps, and at night, when the nurses all went to bed, there was one nurse that was supposed to stay on watch and stay awake and listen for this bell to ring in case somebody was in a bind and needed to come into the rehab. Well, apparently on this particular night, either the bell didn't work or the nurse was slacking and fell asleep. So the next morning, TJ's frozen corpse was found sprawled out on the back steps. And today he seemed pretty content, but he's mainly wandering around inside the corridor right around that back door where he couldn't get in. Tragic, right? It also seems that there were some victims of a different sort here. One of the nurses there was having a fling with not one, but two of the rehab patients there. So she's down in the boiler room having some fun with one of these dudes, and the other side thing comes down there and cold busts him. Well, he's pissed. So he stabs that tramp to death, and then he turns on the other dude. Well, the other dude and him tie into it, but the other dude turns around and kills him. And it was such a bloody scene that there's still blood spatters there on the wall today. In fact, during a recent paranormal investigation there, somebody sampled those blood spatters and had those tested, and those DNA tests did come back and confirmed that it was indeed human blood that was on those walls. Now, besides the rather well-known apparitions that are popping up there, there's a whole bunch of crazy stuff that goes on down there as well. There's reports of everything from talking dolls to massive black apparitions with red glowing eyes. And most everyone who's visited this abandoned hospital has experienced something unexplainable. In fact, the current caretaker has had enough ghostly encounters there to last a lifetime or more. He says that if the lights are on in the nurse's station, everything seems to be calm and he seems like he's alone. But if the lights are turned off, you can see a bunch of other people walking around there. Some of those folks look like just regular folks that could have been visitors or maybe rehab patients, but others are obviously patients that belonged in the hospital or nursing staff or doctors or whatever the case may be. So that's kind of freakish, right? Well, besides seeing the folks that aren't really there, the caretaker says there's a lot of activity around the front entrance. Now, there's a staircase there that's kept closed off in the front of the building by a glass door pane. And every evening, he says that you can hear somebody tapping on that glass pane. There's also plenty of paranormal investigations that have gone down at this hospital. And one of those investigators actually shared some of their experiences in the last couple of months. I ran up on an article. Now, this chick said that she's had a number of personal experiences there and has captured a lot of evidence in the form of pictures and EVPs. This chick has been pushed, she's been touched, she's had her shirt tugged on, and a whole lot more. Another interesting experience she had there was pretty cool. They were trying to invoke the nuns to confirm their presence, and she was there with a partner of hers. And the partner screams out, "Come on, sister, I know you don't like tattoos. What about a Catholic girl with tattoos? Because I've got them." Well, the nuns made their presence known, and immediately thereafter, this disembodied female voice said, "You're going to hell." The Ghost Adventures crew actually did a flash lockdown at the hospital in 2011 and a follow-up in 2014. Now, Zach interviewed a former doctor from that hospital. His name was Dr. Gordon Barth, and he was coincidentally born there on July 4th, 1953. Now, Dr. Barth estimated that there had been about 50 deaths a year, which calculates to an estimated 2,000 deaths in the hospital's history. That's comparable to a battlefield in the Civil War. That's kind of crazy. That hospital definitely did not have a good reputation, not somewhere you would want to visit. Holly, nice to see you, my twisted sister. Glad to see you coming back this evening. David Childers, there's my boy from the Mississippi Paranormal Institute. I got to hook up with you. I really want to do a ghost hunt with you guys. Gavin saying hi. David said hi, Lynn and John. I'll tell Big Boy you gave him a shout out. I might have to look that movie up again. Yeah, do that. I want to know. I might have to look it up myself, Gavin. Scott Singer, glad to see you joining in. My little diva, Jamie Vaccaro, is in the house. Yeah, reminds you of Coon State. You definitely got some crazy memories from that little joint. David, give me a holler because I don't, at the moment, have anything else scheduled for the rest of the year. So I am free to make a run. Just give me a holler. Give me like 4 or 5 days heads up on when you want to go somewhere. I will reserve a room and head down that way. I need to spend some time with you, Lady Jamie. I haven't seen her in like 2 years. Oh my God. Yeah, we definitely need to hook up. We need to go do a ghost hunt and then go have margaritas. Or have margaritas and then do a ghost hunt. I don't know. I think we'll do the margaritas afterwards because, yeah, that's just not good at all. All right, so now I'm kind of in the mood for a couple of haunted cemeteries. How about you guys? It's been a while, right? This is one that I've talked about in the past, but I've got so many new followers. I like going back and talking about some of my favorite stories from back in the day, and I'll share those with the new listeners. Like I said, we have talked about this little boneyard, but got to redo it. It's called Candlemaker Road. And hey, my girl, it is in Edinburgh, Scotland. So I know you know about that. Now, they've been putting corpses in the ground there since the 1600s. So it's like one of the oldest cemeteries around that area. At the entrance, there's this etching that reads, "Non omnis moriar," which means not all of me will die. If I was going to be put in the ground and have a headstone, I think I would have that put on my headstone. But I've seen way too many horror movies. I do not want to go in the ground. Cremation for me. So anyway, that's kind of a fitting slogan for this little cemetery because it kind of warns people of the poltergeist that's there that calls Greyfriars Kirkland home. Now, this poltergeist was known in his human form as Lord Advocate George Mackenzie, or as the locals called him, Bloody Mackenzie. Now, this dude was brutal and vicious. He was a prison warden, and he got his jollies off from torturing the over 400 inmates that he oversaw. Now, a lot of those inmates that died either by his hand or under his watch were buried in the Black Mausoleum section of the Covenanters prison. And Mackenzie, when he bit it, was buried only a few yards away from the prison itself, which unwittingly tied him to the grounds where he tormented so many of these poor bastards. So Mackenzie's ghost has a reputation of being malevolent, and he's known to attack the visitors there. Now, things had gotten so bad that the city council closed the cemetery to the public for a while. That's pretty serious right there. Yeah, try like over 400 reported cases of Mackenzie's annex. Now, these reports included cold spots, scratches, bruises, even faintings. But it hasn't always been Mackenzie that haunted Kirkland. There have been tons of reports for centuries there. And folks have been reporting seeing these shadowy figures of other folks that are buried there. And some of them have even heard their tormented wailing. Now, Mackenzie had basically been at peace for centuries, but something disturbed him. And whatever it was, pissed him the hell off. Now, the locals are still circulating this tale right here, and they all agree that that's something that sent Mackenzie on his tirade has to do with this. They say it was storming one night, and this vagrant decides to break the lock on the mausoleum gate and go inside to get out of the rain. So he starts looking around the surrounding coffins, and out of boredom or out of some macabre sense of curiosity, he decides to break one of them open just to see what's inside. Like, what the hell would you expect to be inside a coffin, asshat? Anyway, this particular section of the vault that he just happened to be in was where Mackenzie's relatives were interred. So, as you've probably already guessed, the shit hit the fan. So immediately after he pries the lid from off of this bone box, this bum starts digging around in there. Well, when he did, the floor of the mausoleum collapses and he falls into this deep, dark pit that was directly below the tomb. So what do you think was in that pit? I can tell you right now, it wasn't a Tupperware party. This pit was filled with the still decaying bodies of plague victims that had been thrown in there and quickly sealed up to prevent the disease from spreading. So this dude's wallowing around in corpse gunk, rotten meat, and rancid human bones. Now it's a party, right? So this poor bastard manages to clamber his way out of this pit of people soup, and he hauls ass out of the cemetery. He's probably grateful for the rain at that point. But anyway, he's still covered in funk, and he looks like whodunit when he runs past this dude that's out there walking his dog and scares the shit out of him. Well, after the pit was resealed, the mausoleum was fenced off and closed to the public. But that didn't stop Mackenzie. He was still pissed, so he starts showing his ass all over the cemetery. And as recently as the year 2000, there have been attempts to try to help this dude find peace. Well, there was this one priest named Colin Grant that was brought in to perform an exorcism on the cemetery. And after several hours, Grant admitted that he had become overwhelmed by the mounting number of tormented souls there. He ended his rite and left abruptly, but shortly after that, Grant drops dead. So I don't know what's going on in this cemetery nowadays. Maybe our girl from Scotland can chime in and let us know if it's still haunted or not. Definitely sounds like to me that there may still be something going on there if a priest could not exorcise it and get any peace. Freddie said, enjoying the show. Keep up the good work. I love you, Freddie. Thank you so much. Mackenzie is Gavin's middle name. As long as it's not Bloody Mackenzie, Gavin, we're all good. He says, a lot of people in my area call me Mac because of my middle name. That's pretty cool. Brett Pingle, hello. Back at you, my boy. Hope you're enjoying the stream. If you are not into spooky, you are in the way wrong place tonight. All right, so I got another little haunted cemetery, kind of sort of, to tell you guys about before we wrap it up for the evening. This little place is called Bara Hack, B-A-R-A Hack, like a hack. It's called the Haunted Village of Lost Voices. It, or what's left of it, is located near Pomfret, Connecticut. Now, it's an isolated little colony that was abandoned sometime before the Civil War, But long before that, there were ghost stories circulating around those folks that settled it. Now, the inhabitants of this little village have been gone for centuries, but their voices and their spiritual imprints have remained there. So visitors have long since been reporting hearing the sounds of children laughing and singing, and mothers calling out to their children, and dogs barking, and livestock, and the rumble of these laden wagons making their way down dirt paths that aren't even there anymore. Now, the name Barahak in Welsh means breaking bread. This place was founded in 1780 by two Welsh families. Now, the founders of the town were Obadiah Higginbotham, which he lived from 1750 to 1803, and the other one was Jonathan Randall. Now, the first ghost sightings there were witnessed by Randall's slaves. Every freaking night he's having problems with his slaves. They're going apeshit. All they're hollering about is they're seeing these ghosts that are reclining in the branches of this elm tree that's on the outskirts of the little village cemetery there. Now, this town has been unoccupied since 1890, and it's marked only by the cellar holes from the little houses that used to be there and the remnants of this lonely little cemetery. And you really have to look for that cemetery, too. From the pictures that I saw, if you're not standing right there in the middle of it, you could overlook it very easily because there are no grave markers like what we see today. No headstones or crosses or anything like that. They're rocks with a name and maybe a date scratched into it. So you really have to know what you're looking for. But anyway, Barahak has immediately become known for being haunted at that point in time. Now, in 1927, this dude named Odell Shepard wrote about it in his book, The Harvest of a Quiet Eye. I looked at this little excerpt from his book, and I thought it was really cool. So I'm going to read it verbatim. It says, "Here had been their houses, represented today by a few gaping cellar holes out of which tall trees were growing. But here is the village of voices, for the place is still peopled, still. Although there is no human habitation, and no one goes there except the few who go to listen, yet there is always a hum and stir of human life. They hear the laughter of children at play, the voices of mothers who have long been dust, calling their children into homes that are now mere holes in the earth. They hear vague snatches of song and the rumble of heavy wagons along an obliterated road. It is as though sounds were able in this place to get round that incomprehensible corner, to pierce that mysterious soundproof wall that we call time." I love that. I think that dude's an excellent writer. So anyway, there was this extensive investigation back there in 1971 and a follow-up in 1972 by a group of college students that were led by Paul. Now, Eno published an article in the October and November 1985 issue of Fate magazine. They'd been escorted to the site by this dude, Harry Chase, who was a longtime resident of Pomfret, and he knew Barahak pretty well. Grew up there, probably trampling around those old graves and in and out of those cellars that are still there. So these guys didn't come back empty-handed. They had some pretty crazy experiences while they were wandering around out there in the remains of this abandoned little village. Now, even though they were miles away from any other house or highways, they could hear these dogs barking and lowing cows and the occasional disembodied human voice coming from out of the surrounding woods there. They also heard children laughing, which they attempted to tape, but for some reason it just wouldn't record. Now, that evening after sunset, they saw tons of bluish streaks or blobs floating all around the woods there. Eno wrote about it in his article. He said, "For more than 7 minutes, we watched a bearded face suspended in the air over the cemetery's western wall, while in an elm tree over the northern wall, we clearly saw a baby-like figure reclining. On one of their expeditions, a member in this group said that his hat had been pulled off of his head and lodged into a tree. They didn't say for sure, but I'm thinking it was probably that haunted elm tree on the outside of the cemetery. Now, along with him there was this professional photographer who had a weird experience of his own. As they're approaching the remains of the cemetery, this photographer, he said he's just like walked into a wall. He couldn't move forward, but he could move from side to side, and he couldn't move backwards. It's said that went on for several minutes, and then eventually he broke free and was able to walk up with the rest of the group into the cemetery and start shooting photos. Now, the group also heard the rumbling of wagons and the shouts of a team driver and the sounds of the cemetery that were fading into the woods. So even though it's really weird to hear all of these kind of noises out in the middle of the woods, what's even crazier is what you don't hear there. There's a complete absence of the sound of birds or insects or other wildlife that should be out in the woods there in Bear Hat. Now, another freakish fact about this area is that sensitive folks seem to feel this overwhelming, ominous sensation when they get anywhere near the area. And folks that are not quite that sensitive are sometimes affected in other ways. Sometimes folks become agitated or sometimes disoriented. And they say that it's not uncommon for even the most experienced hiker to get lost in this area. And many times, some folks have absolutely no memory whatsoever of the time that they spent in that area there at Bear Hat. So that's kind of a cool little place that maybe some of you folks may want to visit. Cool story, David said. Thank you, my love. Glad you enjoyed it. Get with me sometime soon, David. I'll be looking forward to making a trip up there. Okay, so that's pretty much a wrap for me for the evening. I got to go pour another glass of naked wines and take care of some business. But remember, if you need your creepy before next Tuesday night at 7 Central and 8 Eastern, you can always go to authorlyngibson.com where you can check out my books, my blogs, my Facebook page. Make good and damn sure that you go all the way over to the far tab on the right and check out The Edge Radio. You can listen to us stream live, and you can also download the free app for your Android device and take some badass tunes with you. And Big Johnny Blender made a big announcement this morning. We finally broke 99 countries. We are being streamed in 100 countries worldwide. Yes, indeed. Also, if you have a podcast or are thinking about doing a podcast, we're looking for more content. So get in touch with myself or Big Johnny Blender, and we will air your show. As long as it's not political, we don't dabble in that. All right, folks. Thanks so much for joining in and for chiming in there on the comments. That's always appreciated. And remember, if there are legends or ghost stories that you would like to hear about, maybe from your neck of the woods or maybe from somewhere else, send me a message at Southern Horror Queen on Facebook, and I'll be more than happy to dig into those. And the meanwhile, creepy kids, y'all keep it creepy, and we'll see you next week here on the Twisted Southern Horror Queen stream.